Sarah Hodgson with another episode of Life Unleashed. Today I'm going to talk to you about socialization. Socialization with dogs is simply getting them used to the sights and sounds of everyday life. I'm going to break this talk into three specific parts. We're going to talk about puppy socialization and more specifically an intense period of early socialization known as imprinting. But I'm also going to talk about what do you do if you bring in an older dog or a puppy, or you have a life change, you bring home a baby. How do you socialize older dogs with things they're unfamiliar with? And the third part of the talk is going to focus on the startle reflex. What do you do if you have a perfectly well socialized dog, but then they experience something completely unfamiliar and they have a startle reflex? How do you help them process that nuance or process how to manage their reflex when they're addressing that situation so that they don't just explode in defensive barking or jumping? What can they do instead when your dog feels startled or afraid? So let's get the talk started with phase one. Puppyhood. Fun fact, when puppies are first born, their brain is not developed. It takes another 12 to 14 weeks for your puppy's brain to completely develop. So during this phase, a lot of imprinting goes on. What does imprinting means? It means sounds, sights, and smells traverse through your dog's amygdala, aka reptilian brain, and they imprint on their hippocampus as memory. And it's this early and a very intense period of socialization that is the most formative time to get your puppy, should you have them, used to your everyday sights and sounds. So if you plan or you want to take your older dog to school to pick up the kids or on a train or to the city, it's important to get a very young puppy used to those sounds because it will be natural to them. If your puppy is a little bit older, what begins to happen is that socialization window where every sight and sound just floated into their brain and made an imprint, their socialization window slowly begins to close. And by 6 months of age, anything they haven't yet heard or seen or smelled will cause a startle reflex because it's unfamiliar to them. I want you to think of it like a funnel. So when your puppy's little and they have new experiences, those new experiences just flow in like an open funnel. As your puppy matures past that 14-week phase, the funnel begins to invert. Now, there's good news. The funnel never fully closes, but when it's inverted, the new experiences cause a hiccup, a startle reflex. Your dog might get afraid or hyperexcited or defensive if they haven't experienced something repetitively in their puppyhood. So, okay, when your puppy's little, let's start little. Or for example, I bring puppies in, we keep them at the house. It's called Camp Sarah, but it's only done during this 8 to 11 week period. And what I focus on, as much as the housebreaking and the sleep training is important, what I focus on is having the puppy experience something new every day. Whether it's going into town and hearing the train whistle, or going to a goat farm, we have an alpaca farm, or going checking out some horses, or we don't take a young puppy into a dog park, of course, because they're too little and they'll get too overwhelmed. But I'll park my car close to the dog park. I'll stand outside my car with the window rolled down, and I'll treat my puppy as the puppy watches dogs coming in and out, dogs barking, maybe dogs having a little ruckus. During that time, they also hear things like ladders opening and shutting, a blender. They'll hear the vacuum. If, the weather is cooperative, they might hear a thunderstorm. Now, during that period, the puppy needs a model of how to act. So when a puppy hears something that's unfamiliar, they'll startle, but they'll immediately look to an older dog, an older person, someone they look to for protection, someone they look to for food, someone they look to make them feel safe. And they are going to mirror whatever that person or dog is modeling. So let's say it's a train whistle, and I have a dog in town. Now, I'm sure many people are already typing in, queries and comments. Why are you taking dogs out before they're inoculated? And the truth of the matter is I don't. When a puppy is little, I'll put him in a sling. So I'll carry him on my front, or I'll fold out a tent that has a bottom. They have nice canvas tents, and I'll put the puppy in that when I take them out. So they're not directly sniffing the grass and parading about with other dogs until they're inoculated around 4 months. But I'm going to take them out as often as I can. We have a hardware store. I live near the village of Katona, and we have a hardware store that has an elevator. Oh my God. The elevator is the best because I can take an 8-9-week-old puppy that's staying with me for a week or two, and I recommend everybody do this. I just carry him into the elevator. We go up, we go down. Super fun activity for the afternoon. Puppies love information. And at the same time, I'm holding them close to my heart. So most people know puppies are very sensory aware. And when they feel that my heart is calm, they feel calm in reflection. If I'm doing something, let's say I hear a train whistle and I'm scared of that train whistle, my heart rate would go up. But because I am not scared of a train whistle, the puppy will mirror what I'm not modeling, which is NBD. It's no big deal. So again, with young puppies, they go through this intense imprinting period, but their startle reflex is directly correlated with how you're managing yourself during this activity. And the more you can expose your puppy to, the more you can think ahead to what you want to do with your dog as an older dog. If you're planning to have kids, get that young puppy around the sound of babies, the sound of puppies playing, so that they're comfortable as you kind of transfer into that stage of your life. So this early socialization period, the ideal time to get a dog used to everyday sights and sound, is clearly in that 12 to 14 week phase. And I want to dive a little deeper to focus on what that's all about. So when your puppy is born, they have these sharp little needle teeth, which everybody thinks are super painful and god awful, and the puppy nips a lot during this phase. All puppies have needle milk sharp teeth, as well as certain odors that they emit to communicate to the world that they are helpless. Just like little babies, they have those cute little baby teeth. As they shed those teeth and get big adult teeth, they are, they can defend themselves. They are less attached to your everyday moves because they can process the world on their own. Their big brain is developed by 12 to 14 weeks. They shed those puppy teeth. The next thing that happens in your puppy's life is they grow up. Their bones elongate and they grow straight up. Now, funny thing happens around 4.5 to 6 months. They shed those puppy teeth, a few a day, a few at a time. They swallow them mostly. And then what happens when they're shedding them and now they've grown is by 7.5 months, they're about as tall as they'll ever be. And now they fill out. And as they fill out, they develop muscles and mass. And it's during this phase that they begin to really process their interactions with everyday life. They are more mindful of what others are doing, both yourself, anyone in your family, but also what other people are doing in the world around them. So they become more sensually aware. They can hear things, they pay attention to things that are moving, they can smell things very intently. However, while the socialization is continuing, that intense period of socialization, imprinting is over. So we've gone from an open funnel where everything that happens is processed relating to how you cope with the situation. Are you calm? Are you nervous? Are you screaming? As long as you're calm, they'll be calm. That intense period, open funnel, and then it begins to close. And by about 6 months, it's fixed and rigid. So, what do you do with a 6-month-old puppy that, say, hasn't seen a toddler before or hasn't seen a young child before? Or what do you do with a 6-month-old puppy that maybe hasn't heard a train whistle or seen a car, a loud car or skateboarder? How do you manage that? And in fact, how do you manage that if you've adopted a dog older than 6 months who kind of has their socialization window is kind of set in place. It's either they experience things they've uh seen before or heard before and they're okay with it, or they experience something for the very first time. So let's take something as simple as a balloon popping. If the puppy is 10 weeks old and a balloon pops, they'll startle, they'll get nervous, but they'll look around for their parent, dog or human. They'll run to them. And as long as the parent's heart rate is calm, they will mirror that. Once they get to an older stage, when that balloon pops, they are no longer naturally referencing. They no longer run to someone for protection. They respond in a self-protective way. So again, when they're little, they have the milk teeth, they're prey animals, they'll run to you to protect them. As they mature and they are older than 6 months, when something happens that causes a startle reflex, they'll simply react to it. Which begs the question, if your dog's startling to something, what should you do? I'm going to give you a personal example. I have 3 rescues, 1 purebred dog. The rescues came to me when they were pretty young. One came to us around 7 months old. His name is Skippy. He's a German Shepherd. He's very, very sweet. But one day we're out on the field and someone had a party there over the weekend where we were walking, and they had one of those blow up fun castles that you like put air in and the kids bounce on. Anyhow, it was only halfway deflated. So it was making all sorts of sounds, and the little obstacles were blowing around in the wind. He literally tucked his tail, and if I did not have a leash on him, he would have been so far gone by the time I could have even said, Skippy. He just shot. I had him on one of my long lines. So I stepped on it, and I registered his startle reflex, which for him wasn't stand and defend, it was run and hide. So every dog's startle reflex is either stand and defend, run and hide, or get very manic and giddy. A lot of dogs jump like crazy when they're nervous. It's just a way of processing the rise in their adrenaline. What happens when you're started? Your body gets a bolt of adrenaline so you can respond in the moment. Okay, so Skippy startles to the fun house. Now I have to process, okay, if I run over and I say, it's okay, Skippy, it's okay, then I'm whining. I've now run away from the startle house, so I'm mirroring him. I'm not modeling good behavior. So what do? I'll tell you what I did, and then I'll tell you how to do this in your own life. He was on a 30-foot line. So what I did is I turned to the fun house like I was so happy to see one of these. Oh my God, this is like the best thing in the world. So I simply paused, registered he was okay, and then I looked at the fun house. I knelt down. I pretended to sniff the fun house. I rolled over on the fun house. all these things to show him how great it was that we had this activity right in our own backyard. Now, he watched me for a good long while, and I just interacted, sat down. I actually did a couple texts, but I didn't look at him and reinforce his anxiety. I showed him that it was cool. And I would say it took about 3 or 4 minutes, but he very casually sniffed. When he stood kind of at my side, breathing relatively normally, I fished some treats out of my pocket and I registered, is he eating them? Because if he's eating them, then he's no longer feeling fear. But if he isn't eating them, then his adrenaline level runs very high and he's still very nervous. Initially, he didn't eat them, which was a good indicator to me that he was still afraid. So we sat there, I think about 10 minutes, and then he ate a treat kind of hesitantly, and then he loves his treats. And it took him another 10 to 15 seconds, and he was sticking his nose in my pocket and wanting more treats. And then we were back to life as usual. But the key thing to remember is if you have an older dog, the opportunity to socialize them is not necessarily over. It's just going to take a little bit longer to process. So think of any situation. I've had a lot of people call me that they drove to like a field or a park, or they brought their dog to like a farm stand, and the dog heard something that they were unfamiliar with, and they jumped out of the car and took off. So if you have a dog and you're not exactly sure what they're comfortable with yet, go slowly. Be mindful that when you're taking them into new situations, they might get scared. And the only reason they'll get scared is if they experience an unfamiliar sound or smell or some kind of sight. And it can even be like a gazing ball. I've seen a dog afraid of a gazing ball. I've seen a dog afraid of a leaf bag that, is just out in the fall or whenever you scratch up your leaves and put them in a bag. But the littlest thing can startle your dog. And no matter how well you socialize a dog, there may still come a day when they see something that startles them. So, what does a startle reflex look like? This is important. And I'll tell you an interesting thing. True fact. I live in the tri-state area of New York. So kind of suburban, urban, that kind of environment. Not a lot of rural farms going around here. So we often, not me personally, but rescues that are around here often transport dogs from the south or from the islands where they're just feral, almost feral, not really feral, but they're running free and they have to capture them and they send them up to the north and wonderful people rescue them. So another startle reflex could be tactile. So tactile is touch, right? Your dog is very aware of their senses. And the majority of their touch sensitive neurons are in their paws. People don't know that, but that's why a lot of dogs don't like to have their nails clipped or their paws fiddled with, because most of their touch neurons are in their paws. So I've had a lot of people call me and say, my dog doesn't go downstairs. He's afraid of the wood floor. And right away, I'm like, oh, is that a rescue dog from the south? Or did you get him from one of the islands? Yes, 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 yes. Every single time. So the deal with that is if a puppy isn't brought into a home during that early imprinting period, up to about 14 weeks, or hasn't gone down a stairs or been taught to go down a stair during that early phase, they can develop phobias of those things. Here's another one I've seen. It's fascinating. Some dogs are frightened to get in a car. And whenever I get a call like that, I say, is the interior of your car black? People always say, yes. How did you know? Because to a dog, who sees the world differently than you do, a completely dark floor space or environment, or if they're looking down a stair, since they don't have our binocular vision, if it's very dark, it looks like a hole, like a pit, and they get nervous. So those are like socialization. You think of train whistles and the postman and the doorbell and the mixer and the vacuum and thunderstorms. But there's so many things we have to socialize our dogs to that aren't natural to dogs. So what about their internal world? Like, I want to help you understand this socialization process from your dog's mind and body and what happens to them when they get startled. So I'm going to teach you, or your children, bring them around, a few SAT words. And one is parasympathetic, one is sympathetic. And the difference between the two is the parasympathetic reflexes are related to feeling calm, safe, underline safe. And the quick way people think of it is rest and digest. So when you're in your home and you feel safe, you're in your parasympathetic nervous system. To your dog, your den, to your dog, your home is their den. And you also want them to feel safe and comforted when they're inside with you. Now, the sympathetic nervous system gets triggered when your dog gets startled. And the quick way to remember that one is fight or flight. So you know with yourself that when you're frightened or you're frustrated or you get startled by somebody, my kids used to love to say, boo. So much so, I literally yelled at them so loud one day because I just got tired of being scared all the time, right? It really started to make me angry. It was funny the first couple of times. Then it got to the point where I felt angry. I didn't like to be startled. It's not a pleasant feeling. So when a dog gets startled by something that's unfamiliar, what gets triggered is that fight or flight response. That. So internally, what happens is their adrenaline skyrockets. Now, if it startles them to the point of being afraid, what will happen is they'll either withdraw or run away. Or if they've got a really strong sense of themselves and they get startled to the point of being afraid, they'll actually react defensively, aggressively. I think that's maybe offensively. I always get those confused. Anyhow, they'll react in a self-protective manner. So I want you to remember the phrase that aggression is simply the bodyguard of fear. So when a dog is startled, they will become fearful and run away. I'm just going to look at my cameraman. Is that defensive when you run away? Yes. You're on the you're running away from that feeling because you're so scared. Or they'll get so scared that they'll react offensively. They'll come at whatever it is that's startling them. And again, some dogs aren't even socialized with dogs or people, so they can react offensively or defensively when they see a person if during that imprinting phase they didn't experience a lot of diversity in their socialization. Okay, so here we have our adrenaline spiking, and when it's fear-based, there's a level of cortisol that flows through their bloodstream. Here's the thing about these hormones is they don't just dissipate in a flat second. It takes a while to work through their bodies. So here we have a dog experiencing something for the first time and getting triggered. That's a good word to know. You hear it a lot. Triggered simply means it's triggering their fight or flight, triggering their startle reflex. And then you have the dogs that are so friendly that they get manic. So those dogs, when they get startled for a minute, instead of running away or reacting aggressively, they just get giddy. They just get hyper reactive. They jump and they they claw and they might bark or chase their tail. Those are all responses to a rise in their adrenaline. So you're like, that's fascinating, Sarah. What do we do about that? So, why I'm telling you this is it's good to think of your dog's behaviors as a response to rising levels of adrenaline. Think of it like a pressure cooker. If they get super startled and they get a super jolt of adrenaline, they're going to respond by acting out in one of three ways: run away, get excited, go on the offense. If they get a little bit of adrenaline, maybe it's like, I don't know, something coming to the house. They're used to hearing the doorbell, but they don't hear it that much. And whenever they hear the doorbell, they get excited. All behavior is a response to this rising adrenaline. So the question then becomes, how do I help my dog get comfortable with something that's going to be happening frequently in my life? Let's say I just rescued a dog. I know a beautiful Airedale that needs a home. So I'd love to give it a home if we had less animals. Regardless, pretend I adopt the Airedale. Pretend I adopt the Airedale, and I bring this dog named Blue into our home where we have rabbits and cats. And let's pretend that Blue has never seen a rabbit or cat. And when he sees Teddy, or rabbit, hopping across the floor, all he's been socialized to with rabbits is chasing them. He's never been socialized to accepting a bunny in his everyday life. That's one thing. Then let's say later that night, he's up in the kitchen with me and the dogs, and I'm making peanut butter in my Vitamix, which I enjoy doing. But he's never even heard a mixer before. So he has no idea what that sound is. And he gets very afraid. And his reaction to fear is to bark furiously in a very aggressive manner. And then, so that's one reaction. And then let's say I take Blue into the village. I live in a village and there's a train. And he hears the train whistle, but it's so loud. It's so incredibly loud that he actually gets afraid and he wants to run. We have a new dog that I've rescued that I'm committed to. I have 3 situations that he has not been socialized to that I have to help him process. But he is way outside the socialization window. What do? We know, number 1, his adrenaline level is high in these 3 areas. Adrenaline level is high seeing a rabbit on the couch. Adrenaline level spikes when he hears a Vitamix, and it spikes when he hears the train whistle. So how do I deal with it? Anytime you have an older dog that is not socialized to a noise and is reacting with their startle reflex, their fight or flight, there are a couple of good things to know. Number 1 is repetition is the mother of cure. The more this dog is exposed in a very gentle manner, which I'll outline to you, to this experience, the more comfortable he'll be with the experience. Number 2, my reaction to his reaction matters most. Remember another one of my favorite phrases. You're on the park bench, they're on the roller coaster. So I know when he has a startle reflex, it is not him mindfully driving me crazy or robbing me of time. It's simply him being startled and afraid. And I have to help him through that. Okay, number 1, we're going to remember he's not doing it on purpose. Number 2, don't react in a loud or assertive manner. So let's go with the bunny. His whole body says kill the bunny because he's been chasing around bunnies in his last home or down south for months. So right away, I'm going to remember that the closer he is to the bunny, the more he's going to want to kill it. Number 2, I'm going to remember that I also want to protect my bunny. So I'm going to put the bunny behind a gate or a wall, or I'm going to put him in a pen, put him up high so the dog can't actually get to him. Number 3, I'm going to let Blue watch my dogs interact with the bunny because they're used to Teddy and they're not out to get him. So number 3, I'm going to bring Blue back a little so he can witness all these interactions. So we have, he's now mirroring what other dogs are modeling. He is now got more space between him and the bunny. So I'm not going to just let him off a leash in a room with the bunny because I know he'll chase it. So I'll keep him on a leash, keep him a little apart from the bunny. And number 3, anytime he pulls to the bunny, I'm not going to follow him. And in fact, I'm going to wait for him to reference me, to turn around and look at me, and then I'm going to give him treats and reinforce his looking away from the bunny rather than staring the bunny and chasing the bunny down. Now, that's a very extreme example, and it would probably take days to weeks to get him comfortable, but those are all ways to help your dog process how to interact when their prey drive gets triggered. So then we have the Vitamix, which makes him very angry. It's probably a very high sound. So if your dog is older, not socialized to something that's making them angry, the important thing is to either create distance if they react aggressively to a person or dog that's in their vicinity, or lower the intensity. Or in the case of Vitamix or doorbell they might not be used to, I could record it and play it at a lower volume. Now, what we want to pair up with that sound, that sharp grating sound that really frustrates Blue, is play training, games, doing things with the other dogs, maybe some lesson time if they like that. So if I have the Vitamix, I might record it or I might play it in another room while I'm engaging him in fun, interactive activities, so that his association to that sound over time will be, oh, that sound means I focus on mom or dad or the kids and we have fun together. You want to gradually bring the sound to a normal intensity, not just get mad at the dog or yell at the dog for responding, because their response is a natural reaction. So the last example I gave was what to do if a startle or sound or sight really scares your dog. It's so overwhelming to them that they get frightened. So that's kind of a panic reaction. And whether it's just a panic or fearful reaction, you want to help your dog learn that it's no big deal. So how do you do that? So I use the example of a train whistle, which is very loud, all-encompassing, and a train whistle is like a siren. So again, we create more space. We maybe record the sound of the train passing and then play it at home where our dog feels safe when they're eating or we're playing games or I'm petting their belly. And you either create space from the actual train or you record it and you get your dog to a distance, a safe distance or a safe volume where they can process play, joy, feeding. When your dog is eating or playing, they're feeling safe. Dogs do neither when they're startled, which can be a good marker. If your dog is so afraid that they won't eat or play, you're too close and the sound is too intense. Get some distance or record it and play it at a low volume. So I've given you some quick tips. What I'd love you to do is write in your questions. I love to collect questions over a couple-week period after these podcasts and then come up with a podcast that simply addresses all of your questions. Socialization is a big deal. You want your dog to always feel comforted, to feel like they can reference you when they're nervous, but all dogs feel startled some of the time. You just want to winnow it down so it's not often, and that when it happens, they know they can look to you. And when they do look to you, remember, create some distance between whatever the distraction is, whatever's disrupting your dog's sense of safety. Um, and if it's a sound they're going to see or hear on a regular basis, you've got to do some work to get them used to it because it's part of your everyday life. So, thanks again for joining me where we riff on everything dogs and demystify your dog's behavior. Follow my socials, join me online, and tune in for another episode of Life Unleashed.